The email notification glowed on my phone, a mocking reminder of what was stolen. I could almost taste the salt spray of the Dubai coast, feel the desert sun baking into my skin. The image of my brother's fiancé, lounging by a luxury pool, replaced the visions I had of my own relaxation. It wasn't just a vacation, it was a symbol, a tangible representation of the years of sacrifice and hard work that had been casually snatched away. They thought I wouldn't fight back, that I'd quietly accept the injustice, but they were wrong, dead wrong. If your own blood turned against you, would you let them win? Subscribe now and stand with Maya. My name is Maya, and for years I poured every spare dollar I had into building a travel fund for my family. It wasn't some small change jar. This was a meticulously planned and executed financial strategy. I worked overtime, I skipped vacations, I ate ramen when everyone else was ordering takeout. The goal was always clear: a luxurious, all-expenses-paid trip to Dubai for my parents, my brother, and myself. A thank you for the years of support, a celebration of our bond. The total cost? Roughly $30,000, every cent of which came from my dedication. I meticulously researched flights, booked stunning hotel suites overlooking the Burj Khalifa, and even arranged private desert safari tours. Everything was set, the itinerary finalized, the excitement palpable. My parents were thrilled, my brother seemed genuinely appreciative, and I allowed myself a moment of pride in what I had accomplished. I had envisioned us, the four of us, creating memories that would last a lifetime, solidifying our family ties in a destination that represented opulence and adventure. Then came Sarah, my brother's fiancée, a whirlwind of designer handbags and demanding expectations. From the moment she entered our lives, the dynamic shifted. Suddenly, family dinners became showcases for her expensive tastes, and casual conversations morphed into thinly veiled requests for financial assistance. I tried to be welcoming, to see the good in her, but there was an underlying sense of entitlement that grated on my nerves. When I announced the Dubai trip, her initial reaction was one of feigned excitement, quickly followed by a series of probing questions about the cost and accommodations. She subtly hinted that she too deserved such a lavish vacation, a seed of discontent planted in my brother's ear. I brushed it off, focusing on the joy it would bring my parents. The trip was non-negotiable. It was our family trip. Or so I thought. A week before departure, my father called, his voice laced with an uncomfortable hesitation. He explained that Sarah was feeling left out and that my brother was concerned about her well-being. Then came the gut-wrenching blow. They wanted to know if she could have my spot. All the sacrifices, all the hard work, reduced to a casual request to accommodate someone who hadn't lifted a finger to contribute. I felt the crimson rise in my cheeks, a burning tide of betrayal threatening to consume me. I stammered, struggling to articulate the depth of my disappointment. I reminded him of the years I spent saving, the countless hours I dedicated to planning this trip. I pointed out that this was supposed to be a family affair, a testament to our shared history. My pleas fell on deaf ears. My father, usually a pillar of fairness, seemed completely swayed by Sarah's manipulative charm. He argued that it would be selfish of me to insist on going when it would cause such distress to my brother and his future wife. The person I trusted most was one of them. The dagger twisted deeper when he casually mentioned that I could always go on another trip later, completely dismissing the significance of this particular journey, this specific moment in time. My voice caught in my throat, my vision blurred. I wanted to scream, to shatter every piece of expensive china in their perfectly curated dining room. But I didn't. I swallowed the bile, forced a smile, and told him I understood. I would step aside. Let Sarah have my place in the sun. Let them revel in the fruits of my labor. But inside, a cold, calculated rage was taking root. They thought they had won. They thought they had broken me. They had no idea what was coming. The day they left for Dubai, I felt a hollowness settle deep within my bones. It wasn't just the absence of the trip itself, but the gaping wound of betrayal that refused to heal. Every picture they posted online was a fresh twist of the knife. My parents beaming in front of the Burj Khalifa, Sarah sipping cocktails by the pool,
my brother with his arm around her, all of them basking in the opulence that I had painstakingly created. It was my dream, my vision, now being lived out by someone who had contributed nothing but entitlement. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. I'd lie awake for hours, replaying the conversation with my father, dissecting every word, every inflection, searching for a glimmer of understanding that simply wasn't there. The silence of my apartment amplified the turmoil in my head, each tick of the clock a mocking reminder of the precious time slipping away, time that should have been spent creating memories with my family. I tried talking to my friends, hoping to find some solace in their support, but their well-meaning platitudes only served to deepen my frustration. Just let it go, they'd say. It's just a vacation. But it wasn't just a vacation. It was about respect, about loyalty, about the fundamental principles of family that I thought we all shared.
I attempted to talk to my brother, to explain the depth of my hurt, but my calls went unanswered, my texts ignored. It was as if I had ceased to exist, erased from their reality as easily as deleting a photo from a phone. When he finally did respond, it was a curt, dismissive message. "Sarah's having a great time. Don't ruin it." Those words were like a physical blow, confirming the chilling truth that my feelings, my sacrifices, meant absolutely nothing to him. He had chosen her, a newcomer to our family, over his own sister, the person who had always been there for him through thick and thin. The injustice of it all was a heavy weight, pressing down on me, suffocating me with each passing day. I started having nightmares, vivid and disturbing visions of Sarah stealing everything I held dear, replacing me in every aspect of my life. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, the line between reality and hallucination blurred. My work suffered, my relationships strained, and I felt myself spiraling into a dark abyss of resentment and despair. I knew I couldn't continue down this path, consumed by bitterness and self-pity. I needed to find a way to reclaim my power, to right this wrong, to make them understand the magnitude of their betrayal. But how? I was just one person, pitted against a united front of privilege and entitlement. They had the money, the influence, and seemingly the unwavering support of my parents. I considered confronting Sarah directly, laying bare the extent of her manipulation, but I knew it would be futile. She was a master of deflection, of playing the victim, of twisting narratives to suit her own agenda. Any attempt to reason with her would only be met with crocodile tears and accusations of jealousy. I briefly entertained the idea of cutting them all off, severing ties with my brother and parents, but the thought of losing my family, despite their current failings, was too painful to bear. I felt trapped, paralyzed by the complexity of the situation, unsure of which way to turn. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was now tempered with a sense of helplessness, a gnawing fear that I would never be able to escape the shadow of their betrayal. Days turned into weeks, and the Dubai trip became a distant, surreal memory, a constant reminder of what I had lost. But amidst the pain and confusion, a tiny spark of resolve began to flicker. I may have been down, but I was not out. They had underestimated my strength, my resilience, my unwavering determination to fight for what was rightfully mine. The game was far from over. It was just beginning, and I was about to rewrite the rules. The following weeks were a blur of self-neglect and simmering resentment. I stopped caring about my appearance, trading tailored suits for sweatpants and ditching healthy meals for whatever sugary concoction could provide a fleeting moment of comfort. My apartment, once a sanctuary of order and tranquility, devolved into a chaotic mess of unopened mail, discarded takeout containers, and overflowing laundry baskets. I became a recluse, avoiding social gatherings and shutting out anyone who dared to inquire about my well-being. The weight of their betrayal was a constant presence, a leaden cloak dragging me down into the depths of despair. I found myself fixating on the smallest details of their trip, imagining them laughing and celebrating in the very places I had so meticulously planned for our family. Each mental image was a fresh wave of anguish, reinforcing the feeling that I had been completely erased, replaced by someone who didn't deserve to breathe the same air. The injustice of it all was a relentless tormentor, whispering insidious doubts and fueling my already burning rage.
They were living my dream, basking in my hard work, while I was left to wallow in the ruins of my shattered expectations. I even started having trouble at work, my concentration shot, my performance slipping. My boss, a usually understanding woman, called me into her office, her expression a mixture of concern and disappointment. She gently suggested that I take some time off, that I focus on my well-being before things spiraled completely out of control. I knew she was right, but the thought of retreating, of admitting defeat, was unbearable. It felt like giving them another victory, another reason to believe that they had broken me. So I doubled down, pushing myself even harder, determined to prove that I was still capable, that I wouldn't let their actions define me. But the harder I tried, the more I seemed to falter, my efforts only serving to amplify my exhaustion and resentment. I was running on fumes, fueled by nothing but spite and a desperate desire to reclaim some semblance of control. One particularly bleak evening, as I sat alone in my darkened apartment, nursing a glass of cheap wine and scrolling through their meticulously curated vacation photos, something inside me finally snapped. It wasn't a dramatic outburst or a fit of rage, but a quiet, chilling realization that I had reached my limit. I could no longer allow them to dictate my happiness, to consume my thoughts, to poison my existence. I had spent weeks wallowing in self-pity, allowing their betrayal to define me, but it was time to take back my power. The anger was still there, but it was no longer a destructive force, but a catalyst for change. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and made a decision. I would not let them win. I would not let them break me. I would turn their betrayal into my strength, their arrogance into their downfall.
A cold, calculating resolve settled over me, replacing the despair and self-doubt that had plagued me for so long. I was done being a victim. It was time to become a strategist. I slowly rose from my chair, walked over to the window, and gazed out at the city lights twinkling in the distance. The air felt different, charged with a sense of purpose and anticipation. I was no longer the same person they had left behind. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who was about to turn their world upside down. The first step was to gather information, to understand their weaknesses, to identify the cracks in their carefully constructed facade. I would observe, I would listen, I would learn, and when the time was right, I would strike. Not with anger, not with emotion, but with cold, calculated precision. They had made a grave mistake when they underestimated me. They thought they could steal my dream and get away with it. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The game had just begun, and I was about to rewrite the rules. The smile that crept across my face was not one of joy, but of grim satisfaction. They had no idea what was coming. I knew I couldn't confront them directly. My advantage would come from being unseen, unheard, a ghost in their meticulously crafted world. The first step was gathering intel. I reactivated old social media accounts, creating a digital shadow, a silent observer of their online lives. I meticulously documented their posts, their comments, their tagged locations, piecing together a comprehensive picture of their daily routines, their social circles, and most importantly, their vulnerabilities. Sarah, in particular, was a goldmine of information. Her insatiable need for validation led her to overshare every detail of her life, from her shopping sprees to her petty grievances with friends. I learned about her extravagant spending habits, her penchant for gossip, and her deep-seated insecurities, all valuable ammunition for my plan. My brother, on the other hand, was a harder nut to crack. He was more birded, more cautious, but even he couldn't resist the lure of social media. Through his carefully curated posts, I discovered his professional ambitions, his financial anxieties, and his unwavering desire to please Sarah, a weakness she exploited with ruthless efficiency. My parents, bless their hearts, were the easiest to decipher. They were creatures of habit, their lives revolving around their comfortable suburban home, their weekly bridge games, and their unwavering faith in their children. Their weakness was their blind spot, their inability to see the darkness that lurked beneath Sarah's polished exterior. As I delved deeper into their lives, I realized that their greatest strength was also their greatest weakness, their unwavering belief in their own righteousness.
They genuinely believed that they were entitled to the best things in life, and that anyone who stood in their way was simply jealous or resentful. This arrogance blinded them to the consequences of their actions, making them careless and complacent, ripe for exploitation. My plan began to take shape, an intricate web of deception and manipulation designed to expose their true colors and shatter their carefully constructed facade. I knew I couldn't rely on brute force or emotional appeals. I needed to be strategic, methodical, and above all, patient. I started small, planting seeds of discord within their social circle. I subtly leaked damaging information about Sarah's past indiscretions, fueling existing rivalries and creating new ones. I anonymously sent my brother articles about the dangers of financial dependence, highlighting the potential pitfalls of marrying someone who was only interested in his money. I even managed to intercept a few of Sarah's online orders, replacing her designer clothes with cheap knockoffs, a small but satisfying act of sabotage. These were just minor skirmishes, designed to test their defenses and gauge their reactions. The real battle was yet to come. One evening, while catching up with my parents over dinner, an excruciating experience of forced smiles and thinly veiled criticisms, my mother casually mentioned that Sarah was helping my brother with his finances. Apparently, she had convinced him to invest in a lucrative real estate venture, promising exorbitant returns with minimal risk. My ears perked up. This was exactly the kind of opportunity I had been waiting for. I feigned disinterest, subtly probing for more details, careful not to arouse suspicion. I learned that the real estate venture was a private investment, managed by one of Sarah's close friends, a man with a checkered past and a reputation for shady dealings. The more I dug, the more convinced I became that this was a scam, a classic Ponzi scheme designed to fleece unsuspecting investors. This was my chance to strike, to not only expose Sarah's greed, but also to potentially recover some of the money they had stolen from me. I knew I had to tread carefully. One wrong move and my entire plan could unravel. I needed to gather irrefutable evidence, to build a case so strong that they couldn't deny it.
I contacted a friend from college who worked as a forensic accountant, explaining the situation in vague terms, careful not to reveal my personal connection to the case. He agreed to help, discreetly investigating the real estate venture and its key players. The information he uncovered was damning. The lucrative real estate venture was nothing more than a shell corporation with no assets and no legitimate business operations. Sarah's close friend was a convicted con artist with a history of defrauding investors. It was a textbook scam, and my brother was about to become the next victim. I had the evidence I needed, but I couldn't simply hand it over to my brother. He was too blinded by love and loyalty to see the truth. I needed to find a way to expose Sarah's scheme publicly, to force her to confront the consequences of her actions. I remembered Sarah bragging about her meticulously curated social media presence, her obsession with maintaining a perfect image online. That was her weakness, her Achilles heel. I decided to use it against her. I created a fake social media account, posing as a disgruntled investor in the real estate venture. I started posting anonymous comments on Sarah's posts, subtly hinting at the fraudulent nature of the investment. At first, she dismissed them as the ramblings of a jealous troll, but as more and more people started questioning the legitimacy of the venture, her carefully constructed facade began to crumble. I knew the clock was ticking. It was only a matter of time before she discovered my identity, but by then it would be too late. The truth was about to explode, and their world was about to come crashing down. The pressure was mounting. Sarah, sensing the shift in public opinion, went into damage control, posting increasingly defensive and unconvincing explanations of the real estate venture. She even tried to silence her critics, deleting comments and blocking accounts, but it only fueled the fire. The more she tried to suppress the truth, the more determined people were to uncover it. I knew I was walking a tightrope. If Sarah discovered my involvement, she would retaliate with everything she had, and I couldn't risk exposing myself prematurely. But the thought of my brother losing his life savings to her scheme was unbearable. I had to act fast. I decided to escalate my campaign, leaking screenshots of Sarah's private messages, revealing her callous disregard for her investors and her willingness to lie and manipulate to protect her reputation. The response was explosive. Her followers turned on her, accusing her of fraud and demanding their money back. Her carefully constructed world was collapsing around her, and she was desperately trying to hold it together. In a moment of sheer desperation, Sarah made a fatal mistake. She posted a video accusing a jealous ex-friend of orchestrating the entire smear campaign, hinting at my past grievances and subtly suggesting that I was motivated by revenge. It was a thinly veiled attempt to deflect blame and paint herself as the victim, but it backfired spectacularly. Her followers, already suspicious of her motives, saw through her charade, recognizing her attempt to manipulate them. The video went viral, attracting the attention of mainstream media outlets who began investigating the real estate venture and Sarah's connections to the convicted con artist. The truth was finally out in the open, exposed for all to see. My brother, finally realizing the extent of Sarah's deception, confronted her, demanding answers and threatening to call the authorities. She denied everything, of course, but the evidence was overwhelming. He was devastated, heartbroken, and furious. He had blindly trusted her, believing her lies, and she had nearly ruined him. I watched from the shadows, a silent observer of their downfall, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and vindication. They had underestimated me, believing that I was too weak, too broken to fight back. They were wrong. I had played them at their own game, using their arrogance and their greed against them. The game wasn't over yet, but the final act was about to begin. I knew that Sarah would stop at nothing to protect herself, even if it meant throwing my brother under the bus. She was a master of self-preservation, and she would do whatever it took to escape the consequences of her actions. I needed to anticipate her next move, to be one step ahead of her. I decided to set a trap, a carefully orchestrated confrontation that would expose her true nature and force her to face the music. I anonymously contacted a local news station, providing them with irrefutable evidence of Sarah's involvement in the real estate scheme, and suggesting that they ambush her at an upcoming charity gala, a high-profile event where she was scheduled to be the guest of honor. The news station, eager for a scoop, jumped at the opportunity, promising to keep my identity confidential. I knew that this was a risky move, but I was willing to take the chance. The thought of Sarah being publicly humiliated, of her reputation being shattered, was too tempting to resist.
The night of the gala arrived, a swanky affair filled with champagne, canapes, and socialites dressed to the nines. Sarah, oblivious to the storm that was brewing, arrived in a designer gown, her smile as radiant as ever. She posed for photos, mingled with guests, and basked in the attention, completely unaware that her world was about to be turned upside down. As she took the stage to deliver a speech, the news crew swooped in, their cameras rolling, their microphones ready. They confronted her with the evidence of her involvement in the real estate scheme, asking her to explain her connections to the convicted con artist and to address the allegations of fraud. Sarah was caught completely off guard, her face turning pale, her smile vanishing. She stammered, she stuttered, she tried to deny everything, but the evidence was too damning. The crowd gasped, their whispers growing louder, their eyes fixed on Sarah, their expressions a mixture of shock and disbelief. She was exposed, her carefully constructed facade shattered, her reputation ruined. My brother, who had been secretly following Sarah, watched from the sidelines, his heart breaking as he witnessed her downfall. He had loved her, trusted her, believed in her, and she had betrayed him in the worst possible way. As Sarah desperately tried to escape the onslaught of questions, my brother stepped onto the stage, his voice trembling with emotion. He confronted her, not with anger or accusations, but with a simple question. Why? Sarah, cornered and desperate, finally broke down, confessing everything. She admitted to using my brother for his money, to manipulating him into investing in the real estate scheme, to lying and deceiving him at every turn. The crowd was silent, their attention fixed on Sarah, their expressions a mixture of disgust and pity. My brother, his face etched with pain, turned away from her, walking off the stage, his heart shattered beyond repair. Sarah was left standing alone, exposed and humiliated, her world crashing down around her. The news footage went viral, turning Sarah into a pariah, an outcast, a symbol of greed and deception. Her social media accounts were flooded with hate comments, her sponsorships were revoked, and her once glamorous life was reduced to ruins. My revenge was complete. But the story wasn't over yet. There was one final twist, one last card to play, a twist they would never see coming.
The news wasn't the end. It was merely the opening act to Sarah's true nightmare. I knew that simply ruining her reputation wasn't enough. She needed to face legal consequences for her actions. While the media frenzy swirled, I had already been working with my forensic accountant friend to compile all the evidence of Sarah's fraudulent activities, meticulously documenting every transaction, every communication, every lie. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about ensuring that she couldn't hurt anyone else again. The day after the gala, as Sarah was holed up in her mansion, desperately trying to salvage what was left of her life, there was a knock on the door. It wasn't the media. It wasn't another scorned investor. It was the authorities. Armed with the evidence I had provided, they arrested her on multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. The look on her face as she was led away in handcuffs was priceless, a mixture of shock, disbelief, and utter defeat. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the culmination of months of planning and meticulous execution. The trial was a media circus, with Sarah's every move scrutinized and dissected. The prosecution presented a damning case, laying bare her web of lies and deceit. My brother, despite his heartbreak and betrayal, bravely testified against her, his voice filled with pain, but also with a quiet determination to see justice served. I remained in the shadows, a silent observer, watching as Sarah's world crumbled around her. She tried to deflect blame, to paint herself as a victim of circumstance, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury found her guilty on all counts, sentencing her to a lengthy prison term and ordering her to pay restitution to her victims. As she was led away to begin her sentence, she turned and glared in the direction of the gallery, her eyes filled with hatred. She didn't know it was me, but somehow she sensed my presence. In that moment, I felt a strange mix of emotions: satisfaction, vindication, but also a twinge of sadness. I had achieved my revenge, but at what cost? Had I become the very thing I had set out to destroy? My parents, devastated by the scandal and the betrayal, struggled to come to terms with what had happened. They had always believed in Sarah, seeing her as the perfect partner for my brother. Now they were forced to confront the reality of her true nature, a reality that shattered their illusions and left them heartbroken. They reached out to me, expressing their remorse for not believing me sooner, for allowing Sarah to manipulate them so easily. I accepted their apology, knowing that they had been blinded by love and good intentions. I also knew that our relationship would never be the same. The scars of the past were too deep, the wounds too fresh. As for my brother, he struggled to rebuild his life after the ordeal. He lost his savings, his reputation, and his faith in love.
He eventually moved away, seeking a fresh start, a chance to escape the shadow of Sarah's deception. We stayed in touch, but there was always a distance between us, a lingering reminder of the pain and betrayal we had both endured. I knew that time would heal the wounds, but the scars would always remain. They lost everything: their reputation, their wealth, their freedom. They paid the price for their greed, their arrogance, and their betrayal. And me? I just smiled. Some might say that revenge is a dish best served cold, but I disagree. It's a necessary evil, a way to restore balance when justice fails. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.